Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Brian Dowd. Brian is the owner of Skookum Exploration Services in Canada. Welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to hear some of your story. First of all, tell us about what you do at Skookum Exploration Services.
It's a unique business. There's a very small number of us that actually do this. So in mineral exploration, when they're exploring for a mineral deposit, they'll do what's called core drilling. So they will try to get rock cores from deep under the earth, up to a couple thousand feet deep. Sometimes it's only a few hundred meters deep, and when they're going to put the drills on some of the areas that are very rugged and rough, they use heli-portable drill rigs. And when they set those up, those drill rigs need to be set on a work platform. So usually it's a wooden structure that the drill sits on, and while the drill does its work. So my company, Skookum, we build the drill platforms, or the drill pads as they're called, for the drills to sit on when they do their exploration work.
Oh, that's so cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Kind of unique.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I find it fascinating. I know nothing about your industry or how you do that actual work, and I think that's what I love hearing that, because I'm just like amazed. I guess like like a child with looking at a Tonka truck or something. I'm like, I don't know how you guys do that, but it's very cool. So that's awesome. Let's learn about you and your story now. I want to start by asking you about if we go back to the beginning and actually think back to your childhood, Brian. What were some of the moments or themes from that season of your life that really shaped you into the leader you are today?
Well, I'm a middle child, so I don't know if that has any bearings on it, but I was kind of a very self-directed kind of person from as long as I can remember. My parents were they gave us a lot of freedom, and maybe that was the way, kids were a little more free range in my generation, and I grew up in a small town. I don't think my mother ever told me once what I had to wear, or that I had to eat something I didn't like or whatever. So very young, I had a lot of freedom, and I had a lot of choices to make myself. And I remember always making my own choices. I've got a couple of school pictures to prove what kind of choices I made. I dressed up in a Hawaiian shirt one year, and the whole puka shell necklace, even though I'd never been to Hawaii, but that was what I wanted for my school picture. So my first grade picture, I was sitting there with dress pants and a blazer on, the only kid dressed like that. So I always was like that. I remember when I joined Air Cadets at 13, and I didn't ask anybody's permission. I just said, well, I'm going to join Air Cadets. Can you please sign this permission slip? So it was always self-directed for myself. So as a kid, I always felt full autonomy over my life and did what I wanted to do. And, within reasonable parameters from parents. And when I was in cadets, I really took to that type of leadership of, direct communication. The cadets are like a teen version of, young adult version of the military. And we got a lot of training from cadets. I went to 2 summer camps and a lot of other activities and outings. Besides marching around, you learned a lot of things. I learned rappelling and rock climbing, and I learned a lot of other outdoor skills and whatnot from that program. So I really liked that style early on. That was sort of the style of leadership that I was attracted to, the military style of leadership. And it always made sense to me because it was very clear and concise, and there was no talking back. There was no questioning. You just did it. And I think it was good for me at that time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said. I've had quite a few people come on the podcast from the military who've talked about And it's really been eye-opening for me to understand leadership in the military in different parts of the world. And I think you hit the nail on the head with what you just said there about being clear and concise. And I think so much of leadership, I mean, it's why I called my company Clarity. So much of leadership hangs on how clear you are. And when you're unclear, you set yourself and everyone who's following you up for trouble. And when you're very, very clear, it makes everything a lot easier. So I can see how that would be a really valuable leadership lesson at a young age.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that always, you also have to be able to, when you're in the military, you have to being able to be yelled at and, abused to some degree. They probably don't do that to cadets like they did when I was young, but the clarity is what I really liked. I think that set a standard for me when I would communicate with people later on. It was always clear what I expected and what I wanted and what the consequences of activities would be. So I think that I've always tried to do that throughout my leadership activities, when I've been in leadership positions. So
yeah, absolutely. I find it fascinating to hear about, like you said, around your childhood and how your parents gave you so much freedom. How has that played out in your journey as an entrepreneur and as a leader? Have you seen some of the patterns, some of the fingerprint of what you learned at a young age, being able to really go and confidently make your own choices? Is that evident for you in your leadership journey so far?
Yeah, I think some of it I was born with. I would I would have little businesses going when I was a kid, not like businesses, but if I wanted to raise money, I would go try to get a job. I'd mow lawns, I'd do other things like that. So when I was young, usually the money was the motivator. My first job I got when I was 12, and that was cleaning tables and washing dishes at a small fast food restaurant in the town I grew up in. And so that was really good as a 12-year-old, getting minimum wage, working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the summer was great. It was such a great experience as a 12-year-old. So, I worked every summer after that. But as far as, those type of having the freedom, there was always, there was also the parameters of the situation you were in. Like my father and the bosses that I worked for always had expectations of what you had to do as an employee. And so, there wasn't even a thought of slacking off or not doing what you were supposed to do. So as much as there was freedom, there was also parameters in how you had to behave. And I think learning that at a young age was good, not just from my father, but from bosses and whatnot at 12 and 13 and 14.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had this entrepreneurial streak, like you said, which is kind of obviously just built into who you are, and you had these kind of businesses when you were, like you said, which I always love hearing those stories when you're little, because you can see the seed of entrepreneurship and of leadership there. Do you remember what comes to mind when you think of one of the first leadership opportunities that really stretched you or really challenged you out, and you felt out of your depth, or you had to really learn? What comes to mind?
Well, when I first was in mining exploration, I started in the business when I was 17, 18, and then I went and I served a mission for my church. And when I came back after 2 years, I went back into the industry. So I was 22, 23, and I was put into leadership roles, only a few years after that, like 24, 25. And, I only had probably like 5-6 years experience in the industry, but I was a crew lead over people that were 10, 15 years older than me. And that's not always easy to gain their respect. I never really backed down from it. I wasn't really too afraid, but I always looked at it as the only way that they were going to respect me is if I outworked them. So I really worked hard to if there was a dirty job, I would take it. If it was the worst part of the job, I would say I'll do it. Like whatever was the hardest part or whatever was the most difficult, I would do it. And I always would try to outwork the other guys in the crew so that I was getting more done. Of course, you don't always do that, but as long as they could see that I was a hard worker, I felt like I got their respect, even though I was 10 to 15 years younger than them. So
Yeah,
that was the challenge.
that's so good, and that's such a great lesson. Has that, like, how has that proven true in, say, as you know run your own company now? Is it the same, or does it change? You know, there's always that balance of getting in and doing the work, but then also delegating and handing over so that you can think and focus more high level. How, like, are you finding that same principle works, or have you had to adapt it a little bit as you've been in different contexts?
There is a bit of adaptation, of course. I don't have the time always to go and do the same thing that my guys do, but I do it. Like, I mean, say there's a job and I don't have a crew lead, I'll go and do it myself. And that was the original business model, that I'd be out there with everybody else. And as work increased, I couldn't always be in the areas, doing all of that along with everybody else. But they know, all of my employees and the people who work for me know that I can do it, and that I do it. Like, I don't mind taking the dirty jobs or the hard jobs, and sometimes I'll take I'll do a crappy, I take the crappy contract so that my guys don't have to do it. So I'd rather do those type of things and spare them from having to do the jobs that are a little more unpleasant or challenging in some way. And then like, to this day, I don't mind doing that type of work. So I'd rather take the hit than impose it on them, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, and I think that definitely breeds loyalty, and I can see why people would appreciate that, because it's that kind of approach, having, and just having the back of the people that you're leading, that is so valuable. In terms of your career so far, Brian, I'm sure there have been a lot of people who've had a positive influence on your leadership, but are there a couple you can pick out who've really played a big part, or taught you a lot, from right back from when you were little to now, about leadership and about life?
I was thinking about this a lot. I mean, the first person that really had an impact on my life, of course, was my father. And I got a chance to work for him when I was 17, 18. And he was not cruel, but he had a high standard for us, to my brother and I, to meet when we worked for him. So there was always an expectation from him to work hard and to be honest, and I don't know how to say it, but just have the integrity and conscientiousness for your job, so that you always took pride in what you did. You did a good job, as best job as you could, and you were responsible for what you did. You took responsibility, and he was obviously a big role model in my life, and I learned a lot about leadership from him. I don't lead the same way he did. He had quite a temper, but he's since mellowed out quite a bit. But in those days, he had a pretty hard temper, but a lot of people in the industry did at that time. So he wasn't that abnormal, but we didn't want to disappoint him in that way, because you might get yelled at. But, maybe my cadet training made me a little less sensitive to it. I was just not that sensitive to those things anyways as a kid. But then I had another leader when I was a missionary, who was my mission president, and he was my mission president for 2 years. And he was such a nice fellow that when he would ask us to do things, you would want to do them because you really liked him. You really didn't want to let him down. He was such a loving, kind person. And it wasn't that my dad wasn't that way, but it was just a whole different approach. And I really liked like we wanted to do a good job for him and do what we were supposed to because we really admired him. And so I think that approach also was beneficial for me. And I've tried to, you can't really, when you're the boss, you can't really be buds with your guys. Like there's always that distance that exists there. Like once you become that leader, you're just not going to be one of the guys anymore. And it's like not the same way. It doesn't mean you can't cut up with your guys, joke around and everything, but there's a certain line that you can't really cross with them. That type of camaraderie it's not quite the same when you're the boss. So where was I going with this? I think that I've always tried to maintain that friendliness and that the guys know that I have their backs, like you say. I mean, they also know that I'm out there doing the same work as them. So I'm not somebody who hasn't been in the field for 10 years and I forgot what it's like. I'm there and I try to give them the best support I can because I was there last week sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's fresh for me.
I know there'll be a lot of leaders listening who are, we get a lot of listeners who are wanting to step into bigger leadership roles. And so that's what attracts them to the podcast. And I love what you just talked about there around how you can't be, best buds with people you lead. It's a really, I think that's, it's quite controversial. Like there's a lot that everyone seems to agree on, but on this topic, it's really interesting. You have people on one side who, we should be family and they're like your best friend and your brother, and other people who are like, no, there's, you keep, you just can't have any type of connection. And it's really interesting to hear how people talk about it. I know you're not at either extreme, but for those listening who are wanting to step into leadership, I'm interested in your advice. How have you handled that change where you can't be one of the guys' best buds anymore when you're a leader? Any advice for those who might be stepping into roles where that's going to be their new reality soon?
Yeah, it's one thing from going to being one of the guys to then being promoted and then being then a supervisor over those same people that you were one of the guys with. So that's a little more challenging than if you're fresh in as a person who is fresh in as the crew lead or as the leader, so to speak. So if you're the person who's coming in and as a fresh person, that's not difficult to establish the leadership parameters and be friendly. And I think it's good to have those personal relationships where your people can talk to you about anything and share their problems and concerns with you. You really want to hear those problems and concerns from your people. You don't want to have like a strict dictatorship where people are afraid to tell you things. You have to be able to have people to tell you things honestly. If you can't get honesty from your crew or your people, you're really in danger. And then I think for the person who's just recently promoted, I think that you kind of have to say, well, I'm kind of in this role and I may have to make some decisions that you may not like. It doesn't mean that I don't like you anymore. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate your input, but sometimes we're not always going to agree on how things should be done. And ultimately I have to take the responsibility and do things. So don't take it personally if I don't agree with you, or if I don't always act the way you want me to. It's only that I have to do what I think is right, and the decision's mine to make. And so, don't take it personally. And that's the only maybe advice I could tell people. And usually when somebody gets a promotion, it's usually out of merit. Hopefully it is for most people. And then the other coworkers can see that person has deserved it, or they've worked hard for it, and that they're stepping up. And sometimes, if you have a helpful and supportive staff or a company, they're going to support you in that, and they're going to be happy for you. but we don't live in a perfect world, and some people are going to be resentful and maybe a little bit jealous, perhaps, and they may not always be as supportive as they could be, and those people can be difficult to deal with. But you just have to be able to let those people settle in and accept the new dynamic. If they can't accept it, then you're going to have to face them on it and have a conversation with them about it. I don't believe in sweeping anything under the rug. You just got to face it head on. If somebody's having an issue, you got to talk to them about it. And the most clear and earliest way is, clear and early as possible.
Clear and early. Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
And obviously cadets, your dad's leadership style, you definitely didn't grow up in around leadership where things were ignored. It was like obviously things got dealt with, and it was very clear and very early. Any advice on difficult conversations though? What have you learned about when you do have to, with someone you might really like, but you have to have a really hard conversation with them? Any advice for people on that?
Oh yeah, like one of the things I think that you have to do is when you people remember the hard things you say more than the praise. So I do think that if you're ever going to have the conversation with somebody, you have to make it clear that you only have a problem with this particular action, and that overall maybe you're pleased with them, or talk about the things that you are happy with them about, and then say, well, there is only one thing that I have an issue with, and this is the one thing, and I know that you're, maybe I know you're better than this, or I know maybe we don't want to do it the same way, but this is the way I want it done. And sometimes there's more than one right way to do things, and you could tell somebody, well, this is the way I prefer. If it's the hard conversation, somebody really making a terrible mistake, then you've got to say, look, I don't think you're a bad person per se, or I think I really like you, but we have to deal with this issue. And make sure they feel supported, that you're there to help them make the changes that you want. And that if they're making those changes, that you're going to support them in it. And if they're not willing to make the changes, then they're going to have to take the consequences for that too. So, they have to have that level of respect for you.
Yeah, well said. That's so good. There's so many other questions I could ask. I guess, what about an aha moment or a shift in your leadership as you think back over your career so far? That was great to hear about leading older people, like you said, and the challenge of that. Any moments that stand out to you where you think there was you had a significant aha moment, or there was a real shift in your leadership because of something that happened, that was a bit of a groundbreaking kind of moment for you as a leader?
I don't know about a moment, but I do remember the shift that took place when I wasn't one of the guys anymore, and that I was, the leader. It's recently, I guess it's recently happened. So this like when I started my company, Skookum, and sometimes this may sound sort of stupid, but sometimes I do feel like people laugh at some of my jokes that might not have been laughed at before. Like just because I'm the boss, maybe, like, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit, I don't know if that's a subconscious thing on their part, or, like, I don't think I was funny. I don't think my sense of humor is improved, but I do notice more people laugh at some of the things that they used to when I was just like a regular crew guy. So if that makes any sense, sometimes people, I don't know what it is. Maybe they just want to ingratiate themselves to the boss on a subconscious level, or maybe they're just, maybe I am funny, or I don't know, but.
Yeah, no, gee, have I grown funnier? What's going on? That's so funny. What about, so let's jump into some Leadership Express questions. Are there any books that come to mind for you that have been books or podcasts, or anything else that's really that you find yourself gifting to other people or recommending a lot?
I've recommended these books to a few younger people, and I read them when I was pretty young. I read them when I was a teenager. A couple of books, The Power of Positive Thinking. These are old books, right? They're still fantastic books, though. The Power of Positive Thinking and How to Win Friends and Influence People. Those were really great books to read when I was younger. Those books taught me how to have conversations with people and I'm by nature, I'm an optimist. So I'm a very glass half full kind of person. I'm always looking for the upside and positive side of things. So that went right along with my way of thinking, the power of positive thinking. And I believe, you put out the positivity and it does come back to you. I really believe that. If you're like a downer all the time, you're pessimistic, then people do pick up on that. But if you're positive and you're confident, your clients feel like that you're there to help them and accomplish what you need to do. But if you're, a downer all the time or pessimistic, then I don't think that exudes confidence that well with clients or personnel. I think positivity is something that's beneficial. And then the other one, how to win friends and influence people. I think it really teaches people the art of the conversation, how to just get along with other people. For my work, a lot of times we're in a camp where we're staying in the same tent, we're eating our meals together, we're sleeping in the same tent together, and we're working all day together. So you've got to be able to get along with other people. And if there's only a few jobs like that, where you're sort of in those quarters and you're with the same people 24/7. And you have to be able to get along with people. So I try. I'm not always perfect at that, but I try. And conversation's interesting. One of the basic things is to ask people about themselves. People like talking about themselves. And if you just ask them a lot of questions about themselves, it's very interesting. Just as a mental note, you can have a conversation with somebody about themselves and just ask them all kinds of questions about themselves. And a lot of people don't even ask you one question about yourself. And that's not bad, but it's just that's how people get to, really like having conversations, and they like that person that's had a, they'll say, oh, that person's really cool. It's only because you ask them a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a good book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's really stood the test of time, hasn't it?
It has. And one of my employees wanted to read this book. I think it was the 48 Laws of Power. That one, you're probably familiar with that one. I've read that one, but I don't really recommend it because it's very malevolent.
Yes,
it doesn't. There's no morals in it, and I think that's a serious lacking in the book. I say, look, you can read it so you can be prepared for what things people may try to do against you, but I don't recommend using the techniques in this book unless you're pretty cutthroat. Yeah. I don't think that's the best way to be. So
no, I agree.
Yeah, I don't.
I found the same thing. That book is interesting, but I certainly find the 48 Laws of Power that you're right. It feels very much like, okay, here's how people compete. Here's how people use power. And I certainly found some of them, you're like, oh, wow, okay, well, that might be effective, but it's certainly not what I want to do. Whereas How to Win Friends and Influence People is all positioned from a positive win-win framework, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And I always say this to people. I say, it has to be win-win. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And, I've had a couple of business partners in the past where I said, if you make a bad deal with somebody, the person who has got the bad side of the deal is going to be trying to wiggle their way out of that deal all the time. And they're going to build up resentment towards the other party. So why would you want to make a deal like that? Make a deal where both parties are happy and satisfied and they feel like they're both winning and it's mutually beneficial. That's really what capitalism is supposed to be based on. And so I think that you have to have that sort of attitude with all your relationships. It has to be mutually beneficial. And when it's not, then that's the time for that relationship to change or end.
I agree. Couldn't have said it better. Next question for you. What about a great piece of advice you've received? Can you think back to someone giving you a great piece of advice at some point?
Oh, yeah, I guess. I mean, I can give you a couple of things, but I just remember, this was in cadets as well. This is the first thing that came to my mind. I'll give you two. So the first one was when I was in cadets. I was pretty young. I was probably about 12 or 13, and I was asking these questions. One of the guys said, "Stop asking stupid questions. Why don't you think about the question you're going to ask before you ask it? And then think if you know the answer already, and then figure out if that's a smart question or not." And I was like, that was good advice, because a lot of times people will ask a question without even thinking it through first. And so by the time I ask a question, I have already thought about it and I don't really know the answer. So it doesn't mean, I mean, people can say there are no dumb questions, but I disagree. I do think there's questions that people haven't thought through and are willing to ask. The other thing is I had a supervisor, like a project lead, who one time told me, I think there was a problem with something, and then I gave him an explanation, and it was somebody on my team, and I had to like reprimand the person on my team or whatever, and he says, well, he says, you got to remember that you are a shield to your men. So you have to shield your men from too much criticism, from negativity, from being unfairly accused of things, all that sort of stuff. And I always remembered that as really good advice, that when you're a leader, you're a shield for your team. You protect them from outside negativity and distractions and criticisms that are wrong. And if there is valid criticisms, you can take them in and then present them in a way that's positive and that can be accepted. So I think that you have to be a shield for your team. That's one thing I've learned.
That's great. I love that. That's a wonderful picture. Last question for you. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say to them?
I would just say work hard. Work hard is always respected, no matter what. If you're the hardest worker in that office, they will always respect you. Or in that, whatever that situation is, out in the field, in the bush where I work or whatever. If you're the hardest working person and you're the leader, people will always respect you, no matter what. So if you're a hard worker, there's going to be a baseline of respect no matter what. So.
Yeah, that's so good. I love it. And it reminds me of, and I've shared this before, but I just love it. Jerry Seinfeld, and I'm a big fan of the Seinfeld sitcom. And he was on the Tim Ferriss show, which is a great podcast. And Tim Ferriss said, if you could just put one thing on a billboard, for all the world to see, what would it say? And he said, just work, or just do the work, something like that. And I remember thinking, wow, even a comedian, even in comedy, the thing that he puts his finger on to say, this has probably been the key to my longevity and consistency, is that he just is willing to put in the hard work and just outwork others when it comes to, strategically testing and coming up with new ideas and jokes and making sure they're great before he then tours them or uses them. And I mean, there's a lot more to it, but I found it interesting that was his one thing. So I think that's, from all different sectors and parts of the world and all different industries, it's true. Brian, for people who've really enjoyed today, how can they connect with you and your company online?
Sure. My website is skookumexploration.com. So that's SKOOKUM exploration.com. And then my social media links are on there. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. That's where I post most of my content that I do post. I put up videos and pictures and whatnot. So awesome. If you want to know what pad building is, you can look at my website to see what pad building is. So that you have an idea of the work that we do. So
I think it's so cool. I will have to check it out.
I like it. Out of all my activities in mining exploration over 35 years, is the thing I like to do the best now. It's become my favorite work.
Oh, good. Well, that's you've done that well to make that your business then as well. If it's what you enjoy most out of everything in mining and exploration, that's very smart to make that your business.
Yeah, thank you. No, I really love it. I love what I do, and I try to get people who love it as well, and just enjoy the work and enjoy what we do. And there's nothing better than that. There's not a single day that I've ever not wanted to get up and get out there and get to work. I always am excited to go and do what I do. I never dread going to work ever.
That's
I love
cool.
it every single day.
Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. What a great episode. So much fun chatting with Brian about, stories all the way back from childhood and his dad and cadets. And it's been really, really a really rich conversation. Don't forget, I also have the John O. White Leadership Podcast and the Leadership Question of the Day podcast, two other places you can go to continue to invest in your leadership. But I want to finish today by saying thank you to you, Brian, for being so generous with your time. It's been a real joy to spend time with you. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. And I'm enjoying your podcast as well. So thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, John O. White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out John O. White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.